Reusing rockets has increasingly been established as the go-to strategy to lower the cost of launching to space. SpaceX pioneered the move with the vertical takeoff and landing of the Falcon 9 first stages, and many other countries, sometimes after a period of hesitation, are scrambling to develop similar technologies of their own. China naturally is no different, with a healthy number of recently established commercial companies doing exactly that, and with several edging closer and closer to an inaugural launch. Let's cover China's progress in its quest for reusability as of 2022.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Dongfang Hour. Please make sure your seatbelt is securely fastened.
女士们、先生们，我们的飞机已经离开上海，我们预计在当地时间下午6点25分左右到达。
Today, you have approximately 15 to 20 Chinese commercial launch companies, all founded after 2014 when the Chinese government decided to relax and to progressively open the space sector to private capital. These startups are easily unknown outside of China because their marketing efforts are really mostly targeting Chinese customers so far. It's fair to say that today, literally all of their planned launch vehicles, except perhaps for the smallest ones, are being designed to be reusable. And rather than describing each of them individually, let's put them all on a graphic and compare them to their US equivalents. Clearly, most Chinese commercial launch companies are striving to become a sort of pre-Starship SpaceX, in the sense that they are designing Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy equivalents, where first stages and boosters would land vertically in a similar way. Naturally, there are some differences, for example, on payload capacity, on launch site typology, and on the propellants used, and we'll get into that in a minute. There are also two companies that are quite similar to Blue Origin in the sense that they are also developing their own sort of New Shepard suborbital space tourism launch vehicles. And you also have one company called Spacetime, which is planning to literally completely 3D print their rockets, similar to Relativity Space. And finally, you also have a couple more companies that are really hard to put a label on, such as Space Transportation with their spaceplane projects, Rocket Pi with their rockets optimized for biology experiments, or Space Pioneer and their plans for a monoprop-fueled reusable rocket. Now, the most interesting group to look at is undoubtedly the SpaceX equivalents, because these guys are the most advanced in their development, with inaugural launches being not so far off for several of them. And this would be a big event not only for the Chinese launch sector, but on a global space landscape because it would represent the first non-US commercial orbital reusable launch vehicle to enter service. Now, here are the top 5 contenders that are closest to achieving this goal based on the facts that are known as of May 2022, and of course, on my personal opinion. Let's start with Landspace. Landspace is one of the earliest Chinese commercial launch companies founded in 2015, and they have been developing the Zhuque-2 medium lift launch vehicle capable of putting 4 tons into low Earth orbit. This rocket is planned to start its career as an expendable launcher before being upgraded into a reusable one in the future. Now, there are a lot of recent updates that suggest that Landspace is very close to launching the Zhuque-2. For one, last November, their CEO Zhang Chang'u had announced that the rocket could perform its maiden launch in the first quarter of 2022. There's been also a lot of evidence supporting the idea that launch is imminent. For example, with satellite imagery showing a mock-up of the Zhuque-2 being rolled out to the launch site, and also various Chinese social media posts hinting at the completion of the dedicated launch pad. And more recently, we saw Landspace releasing a video with a lot of good footage showing notably the completion of the erection test of the full rocket. And finally, let me just throw in an additional fun fact, which is that the Zhuque-2 is powered by the TQ-11 and the TQ-12 Methalox engines, meaning that the rocket could actually be the first Methalox-powered launch vehicle in the history to enter service. And that would definitely be a nice, shiny achievement for the company's record. Now, moving on to our next 2 companies, which are planning to make their launch vehicles reusable directly at the entry in service. Deep Blue Aerospace is a startup based in Beijing and Jiangsu and founded in 2016. The company has been testing since last year a vertical takeoff, vertical landing prototype called the Nebula M, which is a single-stage rocket that makes increasingly higher altitude hops to verify vertical landing technology. The latest hop took place a couple of days ago on May the 6th, during which the Nebula M reached an unprecedented altitude of 1 kilometer, verifying guidance and control technology for landing and for lateral movement. The company is now planning to retire its Nebula M demonstrator and plans to test next a full-scale prototype of their commercial rocket, the Nebula 1, which will use 9 in-house developed Lating 20 Kerlox engines for 10-kilometer and 100-kilometer hops. And if these go according to plan, the inaugural launch of the Nebula M is scheduled at the end of 2024, according to the company. Worth noting, while the Nebula M looks similar to the Falcon 9, in reality it's actually a much lighter launcher with 2 tons of payload into low Earth orbit, as opposed to 16 for the Falcon 9. Similarly, another startup called Linkspace, founded in January 2014, announced that they would be performing before the end of 2022 a 100-kilometer hop with their RLV-T6 prototype. The RLV-T105 rockets were a series of vertical takeoff, vertical landing single-stage prototypes, which started off as very simple demonstrators and getting increasingly complex with each new version. These experiments put the company on a map internationally very early on due to the impressive footage that the company published, and notably of their RLV-T5 in 2019. The most recent and final version of their VTVL prototype, the RLV-T6, is a much more sophisticated demonstrator, which uses for the first time the company's in-house developed Storm 1 Methlox engines, and it performed static fire tests over the past week on May the 4th. And moving forward, if this upcoming 100-kilometer vertical takeoff, vertical landing test in 2022 goes well, this could pave the way for the entry in service of the reusable launch vehicle, the New Line 1. And finally, just to wrap up, the other 2 industry heavyweights are iSpace and Galactic Energy, founded respectively in 2015 and 2016. There aren't any recent updates from the past couple of weeks from these 2 companies, but we know that Galactic Energy is working on the development of their Pallas 1 rocket, a medium-lift reusable launch vehicle capable of putting 4 tons into LEO, and with a maiden launch scheduled for late 2023. They also have a heavier Pallas 1A rocket, a sort of Falcon Heavy, which would put 14 tons into low Earth orbit with an entry in service in 2025. Galactic Energy is easily one of the strongest and the most well-established Chinese commercial launch companies because they are the only ones currently providing regular launch services with their smaller and expendable Series 1 rocket. The Series 1 was launched twice in 2020 and 2021 and is expected to provide up to 6 launches in total in 2022. And last but not least, we also have iSpace, also one of the strongest contenders and with many similarities with Galactic Energy. But iSpace has a slightly more diversified rocket family with the Hyperbola 2 and Hyperbola 3A, which don't have equivalents in Galactic Energy's lineup of rockets. iSpace is also planning to launch from Hainan and recently signed a strategic cooperation agreement with the Wenchang Satellite Launch Center, while it is possible that Galactic Energy goes more for the sea launch solution for its Pallas rockets, based on some of the marketing material that they have released recently. It's also worth noting that iSpace's rockets use Methlox, so liquid methane and oxygen, while Galactic Energy goes for liquid oxygen and kerosene. So who will be China's SpaceX? In other words, who will be able to provide regular medium to heavy lift launch services with a reusable launch vehicle capable of strong price competitiveness, reliability, and a fast turnover? It's still too early to designate a winner, but the 5 companies mentioned today are definitely getting closer and closer to the finish line, and with 3 out of the 5 having raised already a very significant amount of funding, over $100 million each, and they have benefited from a flow of highly skilled engineers, which have left state-owned companies to work for the Chinese commercial space sector. And while there probably won't be a market big enough to sustain such a large number of launch companies, it's still a fascinating time to watch this sort of internal launch space race within China. And with that being said, as usual, a very special thanks to our patrons, which support us on Patreon and on buymeacoffee.com, with a special mention to our top tier supporter, Jeffrey Schweitzer. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.